to another episode of Chatterbox with me, Mel Biggs. This is the podcast where every month I get to sit down with a folk musician from across the UK and Europe, and we get to chat about music teaching and getting to know them, the musician behind their music. This month my guest is the fantastic Simon Kerr. Many of you will already know who he is, but I know that there are a lot of people listening from other countries that might not be familiar with his legendary prowess. He has been part of so many stalwart, legendary bands over his long career here in the UK, and he's worked with many, many famous folkies, and he's toured the world with Edward II and other bands as well. So I have been very privileged to be able to sit down and spend a long time chatting with him. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to do all the nice things at the end of the podcast. And if you are on Patreon, you'll be surprised to find an hour and a half's extended episode as well. So if you're enjoying this episode and you want more from Simon, then you can sign up to Patreon to get the extended episode. But without further ado, let's get into the Simon Kerr podcast. Simon, I'm really pleased to have you. My first guest in the new bit of the house, which you wouldn't know, people watching, but there's been a lot of work going on here. You've already been admiring some of it. My dad's handiwork.
It looks amazing.
You're a bit of a builder yourself, aren't you?
I wouldn't say builder. I've done a bit of painting and decorating and some property maintenance. So yeah, not really building, but...
Is that just to dive straight in with the questions, if you weren't a musician, do you reckon you would have done more of that, or have you always been a bit of a jack of all trades?
No, if I wasn't a musician, I always wanted to be a chef.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was... I don't know why, but that's... there's a really funny story. Steve Heap, who runs Towersy and stuff, it was his 60th birthday, and I was asked to do a little speech for him. And Steve really helped me in my career. He got me my first job with the Cock and Bull Band. And then he got me the job in the Albion Band, which is a whole other thing. But so I did this whole speech for him about his 60th, about how long I'd known him and how he'd been so helpful to me. And so right at the very end, and I said I'd really like to thank him for ruining my life because I really wanted to be a chef. But yeah, I don't know why. It's something that always fascinated me. It's probably because it was the same hours as being a musician, you know.
Yeah.
Late nights and
lots of stress.
Yeah, lots of stress. Yeah, I wanted to be a chef, really. Yeah.
Do you still cook now? I mean, is that
something
a
lot
to kind of calm down and chill out away from touring? Or?
I love just because I love it, but I have over the years had loads and loads and loads of jobs to support my career.
Yeah, it goes with the territory, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In and out of tours, in and out of bands.
Yeah, I was a postman for a while.
Yeah.
I got sacked from that because I was getting home from gigs at about 2:00 in the morning, getting up to sort the post at 5:00. And then I got to rush off to another gig. So you're not allowed to delay the Queen's mail, apparently, as it was then. And occasionally I just used to hide the bag under my stairs and resort it in the next day because I didn't have time to finish the round. So I did get found out. And
how are you surviving on like 2 hours sleep every other night or something?
I've no idea. No idea. That was in the Albion Band days. Yeah, honestly, it was a ridiculous job to have when you're a gigging musician. But yeah, I've even been, I was a litter picker for a while in the village. Anything I could find in those downtimes just to fill the gaps and bring a bit of extra money in.
I think as well, as a musician, you write a bit of stuff as well, don't you? It kind of, doing different jobs, different walks of life, different people, it really gives you such a broad aspect of society and how we fit in. I
actually wrote Postman's Polka while I was riding my postman's bike. I whistled it in my head and went back, and that's where that tune came from.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was any job that I could lay my hands on, I'd give it a go. Over the years, I used to work in a banana warehouse for a while. I did end up driving for that company, delivering fruit and veg, which was quite nice, until I lost a box of cucumbers on a very sharp bend.
I love that. That needs a tune, surely.
Yeah.
Cucumber bend.
Yeah.
Bendy, I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I think most people listening will know your history of your bands, but can you just because I'm always thick with these things. I don't know all of the details. So can you take us right back to when you first started playing the box and how that got going?
Yeah, I started. It's my dad's fault. In 1972. He was a bell ringer. He had nothing to do with Morris dancing or anything to do with that. And he decided to replace the bells in Moulton Village Church. He So he ran Moulton Village Festival. They booked Brackley Morris men to come and dance, and all the bell ringers stood there and went, "Oh, that's a good laugh. We'll have a go at that." So the next year, in that following year, they formed a Morris team in Moulton. I got drafted into the Morris team when I was 9, and at the very same time, my dad decided that it'd be good for me to have piano accordion lessons.
Okay.
Which I did. My dad used to drive me to Rothwell every Wednesday night to see this guy called Warren Eagle. Nice old boy. I used to be sat there pinned to the chair with a whatever it was.
72 bass, or was it smaller?
It was a 36
okay.
bass, I think, at the time.
But still, on a 9-year-old.
Yeah, it was very big. And I used to start playing like Amazing Grace or whatever it was, and then realised, turn around, that this guy was probably in his late 60s, early 70s, and had fallen asleep. So I just used to sit there silently, not play a note, because I didn't want to wake him up. I couldn't play this thing. I really, it was just, I didn't get it. I just didn't understand it. And the person that came for a lesson after me that I now know, I've known for many years, was Karen Tweed.
Oh, wow.
So Karen Tweed had the piano accordion lessons, and I had the piano accordion lessons. He was obviously a really good teacher because he taught Karen Tweed.
Yeah.
I was obviously really rubbish. And I just used to wait for my dad to turn up, pick the hooter outside, and Warren used to, is that it? Is this it? I didn't say a word, so I did these lessons, and my mum and dad were paying, and I was learning nothing. I just couldn't do it. So, because the Morris team had started, the musicians in Moulton at the time was a guy called Mike Jewett, who is still around, plays great piano accordion. Another guy called Robin Scott, who played concertina, and then a young lad joined the team, and he was 16 at the time, so he was 6-7 years older than me, called Dave Jolly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dave Jolly left a Melodeon at my mum and dad's house one night, and I picked it up there and then and had a go and thought, I can do this.
It made sense.
My mum and dad at that point decided that they weren't going to pay any money to Warren again for accordion lessons, because there's this thing I can get a tune out of,
yeah.
which was Shepherd's Hay. They promised me that if I could get 5 different tunes out of this Melodeon that Dave had left, which he did lend me one. If I'd get 5 tunes, they would buy me a Melodeon, and they bought me a pokerwork, just the 1-row pokerwork.
Yeah.
And that was great. So that's when I started playing. I was 10. Played throughout at school. Used to, any school musical nights and this, that, and the other. Used to be able to get on stage and play a tune. But then I started a Ceilidh band. Well, no, I started a band at school called Aunt Thelma's Candlelight Orchestra.
Very grand name.
Yeah, it was me. It was a guy called Chris Whitehouse, who played banjo, and a guy called Russell Mabbott, who played tuba. You will have come across Russell Mabbott because he's known as Rusty, and he played in Galleon Blast and Family Mahone with Mark Radcliffe.
Okay.
He's the accordion player in that band.
Wow.
And we always used to joke that there was so many there's still lots of Melodeon players in Moulton. Phil Beer just said, called it the Melodians that ate Moulton. At one point, there were 9 Melodeon players in the village.
How big is the village?
Then it had a population of about 3,000.
Wow, so quite a high percentage.
Quite a high percentage, but all from the Morris team,
yeah.
basically, all from the Morris team. Guy Fletcher, who played with Little Johnny England, he lived in the village, and he played Melodeon for a while until he found the fiddle. So Aunt Thelma's Candlelight Orchestra became the little band that I had going the age from about 14 to 17, 18. And we got a 6th form school trip. I'd been taken to Sidmouth, I'll wind back, I'd been taken to Sidmouth by my mum and dad when I was 10 with the Morris team. We weren't booked, we just went down there to watch Chelmsford Morris men dance in a Moulton dance. We literally went on a holiday. And when I got to 16 in 6th form, me and Russell decided that we needed to go back to Sidmouth. So we organised a 6th form school trip to Sidmouth.
Wow.
Russell was driving by then, And so we went down to Sidmouth, 12 of us, because people kind of latched themselves onto this little school band that we got, and we had 3 girls that were singing in the band, who were delightfully named the Wallets. I no idea why. We'd got Marcus had come in on drums, so the band itself went to Sidmouth. We bought 1 adult season ticket and 11 youth tickets.
And you just passed the adult ticket round to get in.
Late night extra under the fence, all of us going in. So from that, we were asked by Pam Porritt, who ran Broadstairs, whether we wanted to play at Broadstairs. So we said, yeah. So the following year, when I was 17, 18, we went and performed as a band at Broadstairs. And they've pretty much booked me every year since.
Wow.
Completely supportive of me as a youngster, which was incredible. And so we did that, and we did the Aunt Thelma's thing, and it was just a bunch of kids. We released a single that got played on Radio 1.
My goodness.
I don't know why. It was absolutely appalling. I've got loads of copies of it still. So we did that.
Was it folk stuff that you were playing?
Yeah. It really was. I was playing all the tunes that I'd learned through the Morris team and the Morris sessions that I'd played. Russell by then was playing keyboards, and we got a drummer and a guitarist with us. That's what I did for a while. Dave Jolly ran a band called Pandemonium, which was the Morris team's Ceilidh band. Yeah. Dave left the team, and I got drafted in kind of in that 16, 17, 18 period. And for me, going out and doing a Ceilidh and earning 30 quid a night was preferable to all my mates stacking shelves at Tesco's. Yeah. So I was probably earning, 60 quid every week. Thought, I like this music business. This is like... so did that. We set up a new band called Captain Thunderbox's Old 13th. Again, silly name. And kind of went on from there, really. And I'd kind of decided that I liked the music, but I had to get a proper job. So I ended up working at Nationwide Anglia, and then I worked at the valuation office in Northampton. Tried all of these different things and kept going back to the music. I got a job as a highways technician for Northamptonshire County Council. Steve Heap had come across me at one of the festivals, and he said, I'm setting this band up to do loads of holiday camps. I'm going to call it Stamp and Clap. And I got to the first one, and in the band was most of the Cock and Bull band. So John Maxwell and Jean-Pierre. There was John Moore, who was working with Tiger Moth at the time. Rod Stradlin used to do it, and I was suddenly in this like band of heavyweights. As far as I was concerned, they were like these are my heroes. So I did that, and Dave Whetstone, who was Cock and Bull's box player, who I'd learned all of his tunes. I just consumed his music for a long time. He decided he was leaving the Cock and Bull band. He was also in the Albion Band at the time. I got this phone call from Steve Heap to say, Dave Whetstone's leaving the Cock and Bull band, and they wondered whether you'd be interested in doing some gigs with them. I said, absolutely. There was no... I knew the material. I'd learnt it,
Absorbed it.
Yeah. Previous to that, I'd absorbed all of the Morrison stuff and all of that. John Kirkpatrick was a massive influence in what I did, what I was playing with, Captain Thunderbox and all of that. So I went and joined Cock and Bull, was with them for about a year, and suddenly, I didn't realise, but behind the scenes, Dave Whetstone had decided he was leaving the Albion Band as well. Okay. He was going to go back to being an accountant, which is what his job was. So I'm cooking breakfast one morning, the phone rings, and I answer it. Hello, is that Simon Kerr? And I said, yes it is. He said, this is Ashley Hutchins. So my immediate response was, oh, come on, Gareth, stop messing me about. And this voice said, Gareth who? And I went, mate, you're not fooling me. He said, no, this is Ashley Hutchins from the Albion Band. I go, oh, hello. He said, I've been given your number by Steve Heap, and he tells me that you've been working in the Cock and Bull Band covering Dave's gig. I said, yeah, I have, yeah. He said, well, Dave's leaving the Albion Band, and it's been suggested that you might be interested in coming along for an audition to to perhaps join the Albion Band? And I'm like, yeah, I'd really, really like that. It's the most stupid question I could
It's
ever
not an
be.
offer you turned down, is it?
And it's like, do you want to join the Albion Band? I'll give you 2 seconds. Yes. So we arranged a audition. They were doing Lark Rise to Candleford at the time as a touring show, and the lineup was Ashley, Phil Beer, Cathy LaSurf, John Shepherd, and Trevor Foster. That was the Lark Rise Albion Band at the time. So I went to the Everyman Theatre in Cheltenham. When I got there, they were set up on stage because the show had happened the night before, and I remember going down onto the. Ashley said he saw me arrive, and he said, "Would you like to come down?" And I went onto the stage. I was so nervous. This was like a dream coming true, but terrifying in equal measure.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, do you want to play something with the band?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, what do you know?" So I said, "Don't know. What would you like me to play?" And he said, "Well, what material hours do you know any?" And I said, "Well, yeah, which
I know the whole catalogue."
I actually said, "Which album?" Like that. And he said, "Well, what's your favourite?" And I said, "Well, Shuffle Off." So he said, "Well, do you want to play anything off that?" I said, "Yeah, I'll play Fretful Porcupine," because I knew that they still played it as a band. So we played that, and it went reasonably well. And then he said, "Do you want to do another one?" And I said, "Well, I do know in Lark Rise you're doing John and Polly's song, which is to the tune of Michael Turner's." So he said, "Well, we'll do that, and Cathy will sing as well if you want." So played that, and then we did one more tune. I can't remember what it was. And he said, "Well, if you, I need to have a chat with the band, and if you just want to go outside for a minute." And I'm like, and he came out. And he said, "If you're happy to join, we'd love to have you in the band."
Wow.
So I'm like,
how old were you at this point, by the way?
21.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, 21, and it was like, wow, this is absolute. If there's ever a band that I wanted to join, that was it. The first gig I did was in Oxford, supporting. It was the Albion Band with Steve Ashley Band were on as well, at the fire station. I remember the gig very, very clearly. It was primarily a dance band that I joined, not the main Albion Band.
Yeah. So
we used to do loads and loads of Ceilidh stuff. And about a year later, they were heading off to a festival in Denmark.
They at this point they were already world touring band.
Yeah,
so
yeah, pretty much.
They had that status.
Yeah. They were a big band, but I was just in the dance band to start. And I got a phone call on the Wednesday. They were heading off to Midfin Festival in Denmark, and it was Ashley to say, "We've got a bit of an issue. Cathy's left the band, and we've got this big festival. Are you available this weekend to do the gig?" He said, "We'll have to use some of the material that Phil sings on and I sing on, but supplement it with some of the tunes."
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I can do it." So we flew out to Denmark, me thinking, a little festival, to find out that we were on, the first band on was the Chieftains, then it was us, then it was B.B. King, then it was Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers, then it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is a really big gig, which it was great, it worked. But from there on out, there was a tour coming up of Germany, and he said, "Right, Cathy's not coming back. Are you okay? Have you got?" So I cleared the diary of other stuff, and that was it. I was in the main band. Yeah, I did that tour. And
was it one of those that just you came back, packed a bag, went out again, or was it like a couple of weeks off, and then it was?
No, the band at that point was doing a big UK tour every year, and then doing stuff in Denmark, stuff in Germany, and they were meant to be going to America, but that tour fell through because they really wanted Cathy. They wouldn't have it without Cathy. So that was 87, 88. Ashley then, I'd recorded an album in the dance band called Got New Shoes. So I'd done it. That was my first ever album that I ever recorded. We decided then that we needed to record an album of that lineup. So we did an album called Give Me a Saddle, I'll Trade You a Horse, which was great to do. It was recorded Topic Records. We were signed to Topic at that point for 2 albums. So we did that, we toured that. And then we did the album 1990. So that was in 1989. We called ourselves Albion Band 89, and then it became Albion Band 90. Some of the stuff on Saddle, I still think it's great material. And those two albums were the first time that the Albion Band ever kind of made any kind of social comment. The songs about the Berlin Wall coming down and stuff like that. So I was well ensconced in the band by then. John Shepherd, the keyboard player, left, which left me, Phil, Ashley and Trevor. And we did auditions for the new member at that point. And 3 people came for auditions. I remember being there, and Ashley really dropped one on us. The 3 people that came to audition were Julie Matthews, Steve Knightley, and Julian Dawson. Julian Dawson was, it wasn't, you could see straight away it wasn't his thing. And then Steve and Julie were like, well, both equally good, but...
Had they already got a name for themselves at that
No,
point?
not
So
particularly. Julie was working with Pat Shaw at the time as a duo. Steve was doing a lot of stuff. I can't think of the name of the band that he was working with at the time. He was a good mate of Phil's, but Show of Hands hadn't started. Yeah. That wasn't a thing. So they did the auditions, and then Ashley turned round to me, Fozzie and Phil, and went, "I'm stepping out of this. It's up to you 3." And it's like, oh, cheers, Ashley. That's really not helpful. And me and Trevor, Fozzie, really liked what Julie had brought to the thing. And Phil was obviously gunning for Steve. But we didn't, if I'm honest, I didn't think Steve was the right person because he's very much out there as a front man.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel there's a band dynamic. Julie immediately felt like she'd be part of the band, part of the team, and I imagine with Steve, he would want to be there with the band.
Yeah.
And that was the only difference. And two of us voted for Julie, and Phil voted for Steve. So we took Julie into the band, which for me was fantastic because me and Julie have been firm, lifelong friends ever since. She always refers to me as her twin. Love her beyond. But then about a year or so after that, Phil decided he was leaving the band. Don't know whether it was anything to do with the Steve decision, but him and Steve had started doing Show of Hands.
Yeah.
And I like to think that the decision not to have Steve birthed Show of Hands.
Yeah,
and
gave them that
it did. It gave them that
to make the decision.
Maybe if Steve had joined the Albion Band, the Show of Hands might never have happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's how I used to kind of put it to bed in my head, really.
Yeah.
That we'd helped that happen. But Phil left, and Ashley decided that he was going to go acoustic. And that didn't work for me. In my head, the Albion Band was a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
I did about a year or so with it, and then I said,
it just changed too much.
It changed too much. So that was 91.
Was that your only band at the time? Or or the main band?
No, it wasn't. I'd set up Tickled Pink.
Okay.
And I was doing Tickled Pink because I wanted, at the time, to have a Ceilidh band that kind of kicked the backsides of some of the other stuff that was out there. Because you've got to remember that I'd seen bands like New Victory Band, and I'd seen Flowers and Frolics, and they changed my life way back because I realised it didn't have to be what was the Efter style bands, but there was still a lot of that about. There wasn't a lot of rock and roll Ceilidh.
Yeah.
So that's how Tickled Pink came about. Something to mess about with when I wasn't with the Albion Band. So they kind of ran parallel, which then ran on for 30 years. But that really was to kick Ceilidh dancing up the backside a bit and go, do you know what? This can be a laugh. This can be heavy duty if we want it to be. So I got out of the Albion Band and didn't really know where I was going. I'd been with the Albion Band for 7 years, there or thereabouts. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I took a job back at the county council in Northampton, and my boss at the time, a guy called Ian Drummond, made me promise that I was not going to leave to join a band again. I'm not going back to music. That's me done. You know, that's the Albion Band. I've done it.
Life dream, tick.
Yeah, tick. So I was back there for, I don't know, about a year.
I was going to say, how long was it before you had to let him down?
a
year.
I arrived at Towersey Festival in that year, 91, and Steve Heap again came out and went, "We've got a message from you in the office. You need to phone Reese Wesson." I'm like, okay. Reese was in America, but he left a number for me to call at the venue they were at. And I'd already said to Reese, jokingly 6 months before, "If you ever leave Edward II, I want your job." Unbeknownst to me, Martin Ellison had said the same thing as well. So I phoned Reese up and I spoke to him, and he went, "I've had enough of this band. This tour, it's absolutely doing me in." He said, "The job's yours if you want it." So, oh, okay. They came back from America. It was their first American tour. They came back, and I spoke to Reese again, and I went, "Is this still happening?" And he went, yeah. He said, "Come up to my place in Shrewsbury. John Moore's coming down from the band." He said, "And if you want the gig, it's yours." So I was like, right, okay. Now, I didn't really know any of Edward II's material.
How long have they been around for?
They'd already been going for about 10 years.
Okay.
By the time
with Reese as the original?
Well, no. Rod Stradling was the original box player with Dave Haynes. They had two boxes. Barnaby Stradling played guitar in the band. Tom Greenhow was the drummer, and he played with another band called the Mekons. And they'd been doing all of that really. They'd been doing TV stuff, like the alternative music scene. And I'd kind of watched them from afar, and I liked the danger of it all, that they were really pushing boundaries. So I went for this kind of rehearsal. Some of the tunes were they're not all common tunes. They were written by Rod Stradling or Dave way back. Reece said, "It's okay, I'm going to do 5 or 6 gigs where we'll both do the gigs together, then I'll step out."
Nice.
And that happened. And, it was a very strange thing, because I ended up rehearsing a lot in Manchester. And, little privileged white boy from Northampton suddenly arriving in Moss Side, that was a massive culture shock. It was very deep-rooted in Manchester, in Moss Side at the time. For me, the first time I went to rehearse there, I was like, this is really quite scary.
Yeah.
It was, looking back, I felt quite uncomfortable, but only through my own naivety.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
But also running alongside this, I was starting to do quite a few gigs without Reese, and realised I couldn't do it. And I thought, I can't play this stuff. And I very, very nearly quit within the first 6 months of being in the band, because it was all quite overwhelming, the actual social aspect of it, and the musical side. And John Moore sat me down, and I said to him, "Look, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can play the stuff. I can't do what Reese did." And he went, "Well, why are you trying to do what Reese did?" He said, "You're not Reese, are you?" And I went, "You'll have to elaborate." And he went, "Well, you're Simon Kerr." He said, "Play it as Simon Kerr would play it." And I went, "Yeah, but you want it to be as it is on the album?" He said, "Yeah, but play it as you would." Reese had, a lot of the stuff Reese had done, because he's a Cajun player, was all backwards, it was all that kind of backward stuff. So that was a real defining moment, because I thought, okay, I can make this my own then.
You had your freedom with it.
They'd given me permission to make it my own.
Is that when you started to introduce English repertoire?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that had been there anyway.
It had been there anyway, but I felt I was able to do that then. Until then, I was trying to be Reese Wesson, and I'm not. To be told that was okay, I hadn't really crossed my mind at that point.
That's a really useful kind of segue onto being able to talk about what you're doing on the Melinar this evening. You'll be able to get it on the recording, as always. And yes, I'm just interrupting this interview on that very note. If you sign up to my Patreon, you'll be able to get not only Simon's Melinar tutorial, where he is teaching his methodology for faking it until you make it, but you will also be able to get the hour-and-a-half long extended edition of this interview. So he is going to be going into so much more detail. My job as an editor this month has been phenomenally massive because there's been so much content that I've just ripped out of this. So if you're interested in more stories to do with Simon's time in the Albion Band, his little moment with the Oyster Band that was quite a nice little anecdote, and plus loads more stories from his time with Edward II about their world tours, beating racism in America and also in the UK when Reese Wesson did something with the BNP party. And it's really just so lovely to hear so many stories that just weren't able to go into this free public podcast. So if you would like to sign up, there is a link in the description in the show notes, and you will be able to access my Patreon there, where you can choose the Chatterbox tier for a small monthly fee, or if you would like the tutorials as well from every guest tutor, you can sign up to the Archangel Plus tier, where you will open the entire archive of content on my Patreon. Thanks ever so much for everyone that supports me over there. It's very much appreciated. And now back to the interview. You're teaching a Melinar on Fake It Till You Make It.
Yeah.
And that must have been quite a poignant moment of that realisation of becoming yourself, which is always that process as an artist, isn't it, of work, and particularly in new scenarios that are overwhelming and presenting a lot of new information. Just talk to us a little bit about how you went into that then after that, and what you ended up learning as a result of that. You know?
Yeah, I think because with the Albion Band stuff, it was very prescriptive anyway. So, you know, people were suggesting parts to me, and I did put my stuff in.
Yeah.
But I hadn't followed anybody at that point. I wasn't having to be someone else in the Albion Band, because I went in just as me. So that wasn't a problem. But it hadn't occurred to me till the Edward II thing to do the same. But I'd always, particularly with the Morris stuff, I was comfortable with that. It was, shall we say, easy, because I just got so used to doing it, repetition and all of that. But the minute they said that to me, it really just opened a massive door. But also, there was a lot of complex stuff being thrown in front of me. You know, we always joked, Edward II, there was a jazz gig going on there, a reggae gig going on there, and a folk gig going on there. But I was playing off of 3 really, really good jazz musicians for a start, all trained at Salford Tech, and had all worked with National Youth Jazz Orchestra, all of that kind of stuff. So there was a challenge there. And again, I had a real confidence knock within the first year and a half, in that one of those musicians really didn't understand what I did. And he made my life really difficult, to the point, again, where I felt like going, I don't need this.
Yeah.
I don't need this. And he questioned everything I played. He questioned why I couldn't play in, you know, G-sharp diminished what's it on the Melodeon. I had to try and explain this instrument to him. He could not understand why we want to play it in this key. And I said, well, what I can do is I can try and approximate, which is where I learned to approximate, or we could just tweak the keys a little bit. And he was quite adamant, no, we're not doing that. You'll have to just get on with it. And quite
immovable.
Yeah, there was no
to work with people who aren't prepared to meet you halfway with things.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared to meet halfway. Luckily, because I considered packing it in again. Luckily for me, he moved on because he got offered a job with a really, really big band, and we didn't fall out over it. We just didn't get each other.
Yeah.
But it made me very uncomfortable.
Have you actually? That's a point. I mean, everything you've talked about so far. You haven't had any formal music training other than on piano accordion, which wasn't really. He fell asleep, so that wasn't even a lesson there.
Well, I have had formal music training in that I've got grade 5 on the trumpet.
Okay.
which I believe Andy Cutting has as well.
Does he?
Yeah, both
he did mention that on his episode.
No, me and Andy both play trumpet, as does Gav Lurie, the boat band, who's a box player.
Amazing. Yeah.
We always talked about setting up a trumpet trio. Yeah. But no,
you could have a duo with Banter with Tim as well.
Yeah,
Has that ever happened?
No, I can't play anymore, but it always made me chuckle, and it's what I try to explain when I do workshops and stuff. With the Melodeon, I cannot see a piece of music and play it and read it. I have no idea what those dots mean. Same piece of music, pick up a trumpet, I can just go da 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 da, because that's how I learned, that's how I was taught. But with the trumpet, take the music away, and I can't do anything on it. I can't play it by ear. So it's that's those two things.
Yeah.
But no, I have got musical training, but not on the Melodeon. And
I mean, jazz training is a very different beast, isn't it? It's multifaceted.
He couldn't get that I had to get stuff in my head first. That I had to be familiar with it, you know. And in rehearsals, it was just uncomfortable. Made me doubt myself massively. But then when he left, I just remembered what John Moore had said: "Be yourself, be you."
Yeah. And
that's been really important all the way through with everything I've ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even with the banter stuff that I'm doing now, Nina has really stretched me, really stretched me, because I got too comfortable. Edward II, technically I've been with him 30 years. The reason that we stopped doing Edward II was that firstly, T, Glenn and Alton went to Ethiopia in the year 2000, and they weren't coming back. That was for spiritual reasons. Didn't work out for T and Glenn, and they came back, but the band had stopped.
Yeah. It
stopped for 10 years complete. So during that time, I did very little musically apart from Tickled Pink, and did some Morris On stuff. But the band, which I'd always wanted the band to come back, because by that point, leading up to that, it sounds conceited to say, but I think we were possibly top of the tree in the late 90s, festival wise. And around the world, we were doing British Council work. We did a 10-week tour of America. We played all over the world. And to be fair, I loved every minute of it. And it really was the closest I could ever imagine to how it would feel to be in a top flight pop band.
Well, I think the only other person I've had on that could talk about this sort of side of the industry has been John Spires, because of how Big Bellowhead went.
Yeah.
How was it for you working with other influences, producers, and this? I mean, it sounds actually like the band knew who they were, they fought for that. Was that the end of it, or were there always other people trying to get their voice
Well,
heard?
it was kind of the end of it, really, because what we did do, our manager had got us a really good lawyer. Yeah, so the lawyer had put a clause in that if they didn't release certain things that we'd recorded within certain timescales, they would pay us. We would be released from the contract, and I think they'd pay us. I think might have been £20,000 or £50,000. I think it was 20,000. Which is what happened, because we said, well, you've not released the single, and we've got a fan base out there that want to know where we've gone, what we're doing. So the lawyer got us the money, and with that, we went into the studio and recorded Zest. It was the first Edward II album I was on. Great material on there. I love it. We still play a lot of that stuff.
Did it come back with like a passion because it was who you were? It was this re-establishing.
Yeah, we were able to go, this is us.
Yeah.
You know, we're not this pop band wearing weird clothes.
Yeah.
We were all taken in by the thrill of big record deal, we're going to make you big, but it very obviously wasn't going to happen, because the band was quite single-minded as a unit, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic.
We did that album, and then we recorded the next album a couple of years later, This Way Up, and they were the two kind of 90s albums that we did, but it was only through that record deal failing that we had the money to be able to do that, and having a good lawyer that really was a good lawyer. But it made the band realise that we didn't need that stuff. Yeah,
you didn't need that side of fame and fortune, I guess, or
no, I know,
or other influences.
Well, it made us realise how important the folk scene was to us, and the support from the artists and other artists and the audience.
Yeah,
you
don't get the same feeling in other areas of the music industry. Do you?
We went from being a big fish in a little pond to a little fish in a very big pond. But we headlined Glastonbury 3 years on the trot on the Avalon stage prior to that, and we were getting a lot of people from outside the folk scene enjoying what we do.
Finding you because of the kind of fusion element of it, I guess, and different types of music.
Yeah, and we were doing big tours and we got a good agency. It did make us realise that, you know what, over there is a really good place to be, rather than somewhere up there with, I guess, industry professionals knocking us down every time.
Some people don't get the opportunity to have that, like, crossroads in life, do you? But actually, you needed that maybe to realise, no, we're going to stay with the home crowd, the comfort crowd,
the reliable crowd, the people that buy all our records and keep us going,
and got us to this point of making this decision, I suppose.
Yeah, so that was in the 90s. That was everything that happened right up until the boys went off to Ethiopia.
And is that when did the band come back after that, or was it?
Well, it was me and John Moore. We wanted to continue with something. We formed a band called E2K with Kelly Weil and a guy called Robbie Forgeau, who was Courtney Pine's drummer, and a keyboard player called Kwame Yaboa, who now is Craig David's MD.
Wow. And
the bass player that we had, his name's just gone right out of my head, but he's currently the bass player with Queen.
Okay.
Now.
That's amazing.
And Neil Yates on whistles and trumpet. And we did one album. We got signed to Topic because they obviously thought it was a good bet. We did one album, but it wasn't the reggae. We'd got rid of the reggae because we couldn't do that, and we brought in more of the kind of Afro vibe thing, a bit Afro-Celtic. We were almost Afro-Celts before they were. Neil wanted to do more of the Irish music, so we did the first album, and that's when I decided it wasn't my thing. That's not me.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of it, and that was an attempt to keep it going. T and Glenn then returned from Ethiopia, and they set up T and Latouche with John and Gavin from Edward II and Benji, who's now with Edward II. And I'm just over here going, I really want to be in T and Latouche. I know my friends are back. But we didn't. There was no intention to reform Edward II. But then I said in 2009, I got in touch with everybody and went, do you fancy a gig or two? I can get some festivals. It won't be difficult. And everyone said yes. So after 9 years off, we met in a studio, the same studio that we'd rehearsed in years ago. And we set up and we wrote a set list and we played it through from start to finish with 10 years off.
Wow. Which
was quite something.
Good old test the muscle memory.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. But it was really exciting to have that band back again. But of course, we were all 10 years older by then. You know, it was rock and roll. It was rock and roll for a good 7 years.
Did it come back with that same energy? I mean, you say you're 10 years you're older at that point, but did you come back with that same ethos and?
Yeah, I think so. I think people have been through a lot in that 10 years in their lives as well. Friendship side of it was back instantly.
Amazing.
You know, and we'd always kept in touch with each other. But it really was a band of brothers. Well, we had a lot of, shall we call them adventures as a band, because I say we were around the world. And a lot of sticky situations, but we all stuck together. The scariest time we had was in America. And that was in 93, and we played all over the States. We were there for 10 weeks. We played in all 5 Canadian provinces, 35 different states. We did 67 gigs in 70 days, driving a whole lot. We didn't fly, and everything was kind of okay until we got down to Virginia, Carolina, South and North Carolina, where one service station, they wouldn't serve us because we've got T. Art and Glenn in the van. They just wouldn't serve. They refused to serve us. The gig in Charleston, Virginia, we were setting up the gig, and it was like an American bar. Guys sitting at the end, not quite having their drinks thrown down the thing at them, but they made some really, really horrendous comments about T. Art and Glenn to me and Duncan, the trumpet player. Not that I'd ever want to repeat what it was they said.
No, sure.
But that night, not a single person came to that gig. not a single person.
Word had gone round.
Oh yeah. And it made me so uncomfortable to think that could happen.
Yeah.
And I think this is the 90s. I thought this was gone. You know, I think it was unnerving for all of us. But we knew as a unit.
You were the unit. You were looking out for each other.
There's no breaking down that.
How did that kind of those experiences? I mean, I don't want to speak for your bandmates because they're not here, but obviously, we can imagine how it might affect them. But with you, and becoming anti-racist, making your own decisions about how to treat people. I mean, obviously, you've always been a decent bloke, but how did that part of you develop through these experiences that you wouldn't have experienced had you not been touring with black musicians?
Well, absolutely. I'd had no experience of, to the point I joined the band. I had very little experience of working with any black people. Coming from Northampton, I remember at my school. I remember when the first black kid came to our school. He was the only one there.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had to think about it. But as soon as I was in this band, it was like, okay, right. The one thing that we never did as a band, we never made comment. We never made any comment on socials or anything about that, because we always believed the band spoke for itself. In interviews, we very often were often asked about our views on, on racism in the UK. But we had decided as a band, you can see, look at that. There's our comment. That is our comment, and the
music says it all.
The music says it all. We always stuck by that.
Can't get through this podcast and not mention Gareth Turner and Little Johnny England and how that all came about. So tell us in a compartmentalised way what all that was and how it came together.
Gareth was my best mate. Still is my best mate.
Yeah.
Having lost him, still my best mate. He came into Moulton Morris men. He was a pupil at my dad's school, and were you about the same age? No, Gareth was 4 years younger than me, 4 or 5 years younger. So he came into the Morris team, learnt the box, and we both ended up in the team all the time playing side by side. Eventually, that became me and him just deciding we're going to have, try and get a couple of gigs, which we did, and we recorded Twos Up. I love that album so much. Phil Beer recorded it. It was in Phil Beer's house. Most of the time he was away. Me and Gareth were running around pressing play and recording and carrying on. We nearly lost it because Phil lost the master tape. we did find it in the chaos that was Phil's studio. We did that, and from that we just decided that we could put a band together. We called it Little Johnny England because that was the name of a playground game that my mum played when she was at primary school in Moulton. Okay. It's a circle game. You are the baker, you are the butcher, you are the candlestick maker. It just seemed like a really good name. It was me, Gareth, Nick Quarmby, who ended up playing with Colvin Quarmby, Jerry Colvin, Ed Frost and Matt Davis, who were in a band at the time called Clarion. That was the original. No, Fred Davis was on guitar. So we set this band up. I did about 3 or 4 gigs with them, and it didn't need 2 boxes. Even though me and Gareth were good playing together, it didn't need it. But I'd also got the Edward II thing going on. It was the same era. So I backed away from it. They brought in Guy Fletcher, and then Ed was drumming. So it just was a thing, and in a way I'm so glad that I did back away, because it wouldn't have been what it was if I'd stayed there. And it allowed Gareth to take that. Oh, absolutely. But me and Gareth always carried on playing. He used to send me a message, pub, meet him down, because he lived in the same village. Yeah. So when you were home, you could just meet up. Yeah. And then obviously I got the shocking news from him that he'd been diagnosed with bowel cancer. And basically, I was with him throughout all of that. His wife Pauline was utterly incredible, but I got to spend in the last he was told he'd got long months, and he'd ended up with about 9 months. But even then we had some great adventures, because I was driving him around a lot because he couldn't drive. He came to Ibiza, couldn't get off the plane on the way back, and I ended up taking morphine up to the airport, and they wouldn't let me in. And I said to him afterwards, I said, they threatened to close the airport because they couldn't get him off the plane. And I said, can you imagine, Gareth, the headlines? 2 Melodeon players caused international incident at airport. 1 caught carrying Class A drugs. It was that,
Yeah.
But no, I just spent...
In that time, his last months, was that when you recorded the album?
Yeah.
Or I wondered where that had landed, whether it was before.
It was when he knew he was going through serious amounts of chemo, and he knew that the prognosis wasn't great, and we'd already planned before all this. We were planning to go and go on tour, and he'd bought a nice car so we could tour. But we started recording it at home with Stefan. Decided we couldn't do it that way. Most of that album, he was on serious amounts of morphine, and he said to me one day, he said, morphine's not a performance enhancing drug. But we got through it, and he was taking breaks and rests, and we got it. There's just one track on there that he couldn't play, and I ended up playing it on his box. So there's that, and then when it didn't get mixed until after. Well, we did a final mix before he passed away, and he heard it.
I was going to say, did he get to hear it?
He did. Stefan did the mixes, and we played it to him, and he loved it. And we had planned to do some more mixes, and then me and Stefan went, no, that's what he heard.
Yeah.
It's exactly what he heard, and that's how we made one change. The very last track is a tune of his called Eliza's Waltz, and it goes into it from Midnight on the Water.
Yeah.
And I played on that, and Stefan phoned me up and he said, no disrespect, Dad, but what you're playing on there isn't sitting very well. He said, but I'd like to just leave Gareth playing on his own at the end. And I still struggle listening to it because it just fades at the end.
No.
I know, it's a proper kind of...
What did your boy do to you by fading out?
I know. But in retrospect, it was perfect. And I'd said to him all along, this tune is a cracking little tune. And I said to him, I said, I can't play that. And I've tried playing it since. I still can't play it. And
do you play any of that material with Banter now?
We do Jake's Jig. We're trying to bring some more bits and pieces of Gareth's in.
As and when you can
emotionally deal with it. Yes, yeah. There's a funny story, and Pauline, his wife, would say that he didn't say it, and I say he did say it. When I told him that I couldn't play Eliza's Waltz, he just looked at me and he said, it's because you haven't got the buttons or the talent. No, she says he didn't. I'm going to say he did, but yeah, he was right, even if he didn't say it. But we always bounced off each other a lot.
I want to finish with some quick fire questions.
Go on.
Because you very graciously, without me even asking him, put a little post on Facebook asking, what should I talk about on the Melinar this evening, which you've been planning for 3 hours apparently today. Looking forward to it.
Yep.
But loads of people then came on a thread and were asking you questions, and I thought, thank you very much for doing my interview prep for me. So I want to start, and this might not be easy to answer in a potted kind of hitting way, but Will Allen, former Chatterbox guest, asked how to avoid getting burnt out or tired of the folk scene.
Really briefly, for me, reinvention. I think I've never tired of the folk scene because I absolutely love it. The folk scene as a thing, I love it. But in terms of working on it, I just reinvented every time and looked at something different. And what can I do now? I did get into it. Whenever I got into a rut, I've stopped. And I suppose with Ed the Second, it became cabaret. In the end, it was so automatic. We knew what every person was going to do at every minute of the gig. And that starts to get boring, so that's time to stop.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know whether he means burning out in terms of weary of the scene. I don't get weary of the scene because I love it.
And I mean, Banter, that you said in this comments thread, that's how that came about, was just seeing something different, wanting to do something different and sort of help the folk scene evolve in a different way and give them new things to listen to, which...
Yeah, Yeah,
You've definitely done that.
Yeah, I've definitely done that with Banter,
and with Tickled Pink, it seems to be something that
yes.
you've mentioned a lot about.
Yeah.
Seeing where you can bring other influences in and move in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's sort of how I've always looked at it. It's got to excite me to do something different, and I've always said the minute I stop enjoying this, I will quit.
Yeah,
and I've never stopped enjoying it. I've had moments where I'm thinking, don't know what to do. But coming up 60, I haven't got a lot of options left now. I've got to keep going.
I've got to keep ploughing that furrow.
I've got to keep going. But the beautiful thing is I don't have to retire.
Yeah.
I can keep going until I fall off my perch.
Yeah. Hopefully not on stage, but you know.
Well,
yeah.
do you
want to go and blaze of glory like
it's
that?
not going to worry me.
Someone else's problem.
Yeah. But no, that's where I am with it. Just
great.
Keep reinventing.
Do you see? I mean, this is me asking this now, but do you see another band in your future? Or are you happy with what you've got and you're reinventing within that context? Because I mean, Banter have evolved so much from a Ceilidh band, which people still class you as a Ceilidh band. It's like they don't do a lot of Ceilidhs anymore. There's a lot of singing going on and amazing stuff. Yeah. But do you see that still got space to keep rolling forward? Yeah,
we've got another album on the horizon, which is great. Good. We're calling it English.
Album 5, is that
Album 5. Yeah. It needs to be a seven-letter word. So it's going to be called English with a little e, and the little e is really important.
Okay.
So there's a new album on the horizon. We're still moving deeper and deeper into trad material, which is great because when we first started, we were doing self-pen stuff. There's the possibility of doing more Morris on stuff coming down the line. Wow. I've just been generally talking with Tom Wright and Gav Davenport and Guy, hopefully bringing in Miranda Sykes and Rosie Hood into that thing.
Very nice.
With Ashley's blessing, if we need to speak to him, but that's coming. I don't know. I just don't know what the next. I don't think about a next project until
it's
I need to. Really, I don't often get asked to join something. Edward II was one of my albums. The two biggies I was asked to join. But the rest of it, I try to invent for myself because I find that more satisfying, and it's feeding a need in me, obviously at the time.
You said something in that about that linked in with Jamie Wheeler, who, if you don't know, I've only just come to know of him, which is very embarrassing, but wonderful Banter player. And he said about how do you not get bored of looking at the Melodeon? He said something about he gets frustrated and despondent with it, which was a really honest comment from him. Yeah. But has that ever happened to you? Like, how do you keep it fresh? How do you feel?
The only time it happened to me was during COVID when I locked it in the cupboard and I really didn't want to get it out or touch it. I did not want to go anywhere near the thing.
But you started your online sessions.
I did.
Is that because you wanted to get it back out?
No. I did that right at the very beginning.
Okay.
And I did that for quite a while, and then I got to the point where I thought, what's the point? That's why I stopped quite abruptly from doing it. Because we had another year or so after I finished that where they just went in the cupboard and I thought, well, they're never coming out again.
Wow, I don't think you were alone in that. I won't name him because I don't know if he wants people to know this, but I was talking with another musician who had a similar thought of, I'm just going to stop this and get a proper job and not play music anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that sudden stop of gigging.
Well, I've spoken to Jamie because he was telling me that he's got another 2 years of playing for Banter, and then that's it. He's stopping, finishing. And I go, no, you're not. No, you can't possibly. But he's adamant. And his reason for doing that is because, as I understand it, is that nobody else will come along and take his place if he keeps going. Oh. And he wants to encourage other people to take up the mantle of the musician.
It's quite honourable.
Yeah, it's very honourable. It's a shame.
I've only just discovered him and he's lovely.
I know, he's a great player. But his fiddle playing is great as well.
Yeah. Well, as long as he keeps going with that, I suppose.
I think he likes his sessions. I don't.
Yeah, he's not going to stop playing.
He's stopping Banter.
Yeah.
He's stopping playing for Banter. Yeah, which will be a shame. But
I can see his reasoning actually.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said this, but I've heard you say this before, that if you had the choice to do Morris or do gigs and bands and tours, then you choose Morris every day. And I understand your reasoning, but I'm curious as to why specifically. Like, what is it about the Morris? It's in your blood, it's in your veins, in your bones, but...
What it is Morris, playing for the Morris has given me everything that I've done. So without having done that, without having played for the Morris, I wouldn't have been in the Albion Band, I wouldn't have been in the second band to Tickled Pink. None of that would have happened. And it just occurred to me only the other day, if my dad hadn't have been a bell ringer, if my dad hadn't decided to replace the bells in the village and start a festival, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, because that would not have happened, because the Morris world wouldn't have opened up to him. And I think my reasoning is, I've always said, if I was given a life or death, choose one or the other, I would choose the Morris, because it gave me everything in the first place. And maybe if I start again with the Morris, I could start my career all over again. It's a weird logic, but it's given me everything.
The metamorphosis.
So I owe it to the Morris.
That's
so
lovely.
that would be my choice.
There's also something, I want to say this quickly, because what you do in Moulton with bringing on young lads from the village who aren't folky at all, but they end up joining, and it's a real, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like that boys' club. It's that sort of way of, this is what our village do, and they dance every year at the festival, and there's a real pride in that, isn't there? That community pride. Yeah,
I suppose for me, when I was 12, 13, 14, the village didn't show as much respect to it as they do now. But because we're now 30, 40 years on from that, so much happens in the village that the Morris team is part of, just like the cricket team is, the football team, the hockey team. They're proud of all of that stuff. So there's no stigma attached to the Morris team anymore. When I used to walk down the street, I used to get Paul, the other one's got bells on it. The lads in the village that have joined they're drinking in the pubs anyway, so their mates, all their mates that would have taken the mickey are their mates.
Yeah.
And some of them are going, I quite fancy having a go at that. So it's taken a long time to establish that. And the same goes in Banter, we were just talking about. Nobody in Banter takes the mickey out of the Morris dancers at all.
Yeah.
Because that's us, that's ours. We're proud of that.
It's seen every year.
Yeah, so I think that's why it's worked. And I take some of the lads with the team to festivals, and they're like, what the hell's going on here? What's this all about? They love it.
Yeah, but it's not a world that they're
discovering the folk scene because they joined a Morris team, which is not always the case. A lot of people discover Morris dancing because they're on the folk scene.
Yeah.
And I always thought that Morris dancing is the best access route to the folk scene.
Yeah.
Rather than the other way around.
Completely, and access to music as well, like playing music and.
Yeah.
This one might be really difficult to answer shortly, but Martin Ellison, again, former Chatterbox guest, asked what makes an English player an English player. Like, what's the stylistics? He went into a lot more detail, but I'm trying to keep it potted.
Yeah.
And, comparing, your traditional players that are on wax cylinders to revivalists to people that are playing these days. Where I really want to get from this is, what do you think is an English style? How do you play as an English player?
Oh, it's a really tough question, isn't it? Because I just do what I do.
It's hard to define it somehow. And maybe we don't want to be the ones to define it.
Well, I could pick out other players and say who I think are more English players than others. Somebody I think who's an incredible English player is Matt Quinn. Mm. Yeah? And
there's legacy there as well.
And there's legacy there as well.
Yeah.
John Kay. For me, there you go.
Definitive.
Martin, there's something so English about his playing. Trouble is, you miss people out and you think they're not. But what I would say is the new breed of players have had much more influence from outside.
Yeah, because the internet is vast.
Because it's vast. And in actual fact, and I know he plays other stuff, but Will Allen, his English playing it makes me want to listen. Mm. My style is just because I play for the Morris and that's what I like. I really struggle to try and play other stuff. I'm just trying to think. Pete Coe, you see, Pete Coe was a great player, great English player.
It's interesting how I'd love to get John Kirkpatrick on here. He said no to me a couple of years ago. Maybe he'd changed his mind now. I don't know. But who influenced him? Did he get to know any of the the old boys? The people. I don't know, but. Because I think everyone I've interviewed so far that's on the English scene has been influenced by John Kirkpatrick, so he's kind of like
Well, I mentioned
0.0.
I did mention my dad had 2 albums, Melodeon Greats, and that had a load of tunes. I can't even really remember the players on there, but Font Watling was one of them, and I loved listening to what he was playing. But it never drew me into going and listening to more and more and more. Mm. I just learnt the tunes off there.
Yeah.
There was a tune on there called The Rose Polka, which I still play today. And that tune taught me how to play the A part in C on a GD box. Just that one tune.
Yeah.
It's the only tune I can play like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm just trying to think who... See, New Victory Band, for me, they really, really influenced me with Roger and Pete Coe and all that lot. Umps and Dumps, which was, you know, Tufty Swift and John Kirkpatrick.
Yeah.
Consumed that album. All of the Morrison stuff, obviously. So I think I saw Archie playing the other week with Sam Kelly, and I would say he's an English player, but he has absorbed more stuff in a wide world, which is great because
he's kind of moved laterally, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of Irish influence in his
exactly,
European influence.
Exactly.
As
So,
well,
if I had to choose one quintessential English player that I really, really love listening to, I'm going to say Matt Quinn, actually.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Shout out to Matt Quinn, the other folk podcaster that I know about.
Yeah.
I've got one last question,
Yeah.
and this was a cheeky one. I messaged Saul Rose and said, got Simon coming in later. You got any questions for him? And what he says is, when are you going to learn some new tunes?
Oh, do you know what?
This has been an ongoing...
Well, yeah, it is really. But you say, you can get lazy with tunes, and you play what you play. The last time I learned a massive amount of new tunes was when I joined Whack Weasel.
Yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Because it's all stuff they've written, and it's amazing, but quite tricky.
Yeah, quite tricky. Quite tricky. I have learned quite a lot of new tunes. It just shows, Saul, that you've not been listening to Banter.
Okay, there we go. Buck is passed back to you, Saul. Leave some slap chat in the comments.
Bless you. Love you, Saul.
Well, we've massively overrun. I think we've been filming for nearly 2 hours, and my edit job is going to be mental. There are so many more questions I had to hold back. Maybe we should get Simon back for a part 2 if you'd be interested.
I'd love to. Yeah.
There's been a little rumour of that happening on my Patreon commentary, but thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for asking me questions.
What an incredible career, and it's not over yet.
It's not over yet.
I don't want it to sound like I meant it like that, but
no.
It's just a beautiful thing that you've shared, and and all the music that you made.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Simon Kerr for that fantastic interview. I was really grateful for his time, and if you want a part 2, there is so much more to talk about. Drop me a comment and we'll see if we can get that planned for next season. This month over on my Patreon, I have got a really unique guest, and I am very excited to invite on the fantastic Cajun player, Chris Hall. He's actually local to me. He lives near Derby, and he's going to be coming to my house to record the podcast interview, but he's also going to be leading a Melinar tutorial, which you can join, you can learn from him. He's going to be teaching from Cajun to blues, all about pentatonic scales and doing all sorts of crazy stuff on a 1-row Melodeon. You can come if you have 2 rows, it's absolutely fine. He's going to be joining me on Wednesday the 23rd of July at 7 p.m. live on Zoom. So if you're interested in being part of that, you'll need to sign up to my Patreon in order to get the Zoom link, and all of the details are in the description of the show notes. Also, just a couple of notes from me. I have got my fantastic Folk Unbound, The Gathering with Lucy Huzzard and Frankie Inslee. We are finally getting round to running this week. Today, if you're listening, it is the final day for applications. So if you happen to be free from the 14th to the 18th of July, if you are a cisgendered woman or a trans man or trans woman, or if you're non-binary gender fluid, if you would like to join us and you are an instrumentalist, you can have a last chance of applying today, the 7th of July, and check the show notes for the link to that. And also on the 20th of July, there is another practice for my Wilkes's Gob Morris, my Border Morris side, that I am starting to revive here in Swadlincote where I live. If you would like to be part of it, then you can check out the link below as well. We do have our first dance out booked in September, and we've got quite a tasty amount of new recruits, but we are always looking for more dancers and musicians. So if you would like to come and be part of a side with me and a load of other crazy, inclusive bunch of people, then get in touch. That's it from me this month. Thank you ever so much for listening, and to everyone that supports me on Patreon. I've actually just remembered a really funny anecdote that Simon told me about when he was a banana warehouse operative. So if you are interested in finding out about Simon's alternative jobs, another little nudge for you to go and sign up for the extended episode of this podcast, where you can find out so much more about his time working with bananas. Thanks ever so much for listening, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all the lovely things on the platform that you're listening on to support this podcast. Leave a review, and I will see you next month. Bye.